Mr. Geert had a family emergency, so he will not be joining us this evening. So I have, I emailed the mayor a few questions and he replied. So I was going to go over those and then see if anything else comes up. And Mr. Barnes, if you have any input too, the more the merrier.
Thank you.
So I do want to have, I would like at the end of this meeting, there he is, to kind of have a yay or nay. So when I submit my committee report for our meeting, special meeting tomorrow, we can have all that information available. Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for joining.
Hello, Chief. Okay. Oh, good. Hi, Ellen.
Hello.
Do you want me to go through the questions that you emailed me, or do you want to just take the floor and go over anything that you want to go over?
Well, I mean, I can.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. You're welcome, sir.
Thanks.
Sorry, taking off.
Really, a copy for you to keep.
I'll get it back. Yeah.
You can take a look at it. And the questions that you sent, I sent you answers. I don't know if you shared them with other members or not, but
I haven't yet. So
okay, well, I can go through them.
okay,
I mean, it's not a ton of questions.
yeah.
Capital improvement projects, more information than anything like, see, long-term goals in this section. I want to know what goals the city has specifically focused on at this time. And what I stated back to you was our goals have been to catch up with all the different neglect and maintenance previous years. Yes, we are now at a spot where we need to plot a path forward. Part of it is preventive maintenance, and part of the other part is exciting new things for Norwood. So, you know, we have a 5-year list of capital improvements, but it's ever changing. The requirements, the requests are always changing. So that's going to be something that just continues to happen. But it would be great to have, you know, planners come in or somebody come in. I mean, we don't have anybody in our organization that really would plot a path forward to say, you know, here are the things other than our 5-year plan that you're seeing in front of you that says, you know, this is where the city needs to go long-term. There've been, you know, there are tons of, everybody's got an idea. There's always ideas of how to spend tax money, but what's the path we're trying to go forward? Been pretty simple this whole time for me is, you know, okay, we've got a little bit of money now. How do we, you know, spend it in the best way possible? And I think we've done pretty well over the last 4 years, but I think it's a reasonable request from city council to say, do we have a plan? Do we have a, and I know the chiefs, both the chiefs have plans for their departments and how they would like to see things move forward. So long-winded answer.
I like it.
General fund revenue assumptions, fines and forfeitures, auxiliary and parking enforcement budget plan. We started working on some parking changes at one point, but then we didn't have the money or the resources at the time for parking meters and regulating parking, which, you know, a lot of people will say, well, just get rid of all the parking meters. We don't even need parking meters. But parking meters regulate the people who park there. So if you have a business, you don't want somebody to pull up and park in front of your business and take the spots that are close to your business all day long. So there's a necessity for regulating the parking and then restricting parking when we have travel and flow lanes and stuff. But there are so many different ways to do parking now. At one point we said, well, we're going to go to where you have to download the app, and we have the app, and you know, you download the app on your phone. But now, as different studies come out, it is a good way to do it, but it's not the only way that you should be doing it. I mean, people should be able to drop a coin in a parking meter, and there's some different discussions on what cities should be doing for the general population. I mean, does the person really have to, they're gonna run into a barber shop for 15 minutes or half an hour and get a haircut? Do they have to download the app and put in their credit card and do all those things? And so there's been some discussion on that, so we're gonna have to work on what's the best system for the city of Norwood. And as we revitalize the downtown Norwood, the central business district, what's always been recognized as the central business district, you know, what's the best way, what's the best parking enforcement and parking regulation for those areas?
Have we been able to hire all auxiliary officers? There was 4 in the budget.
Well, we have 4 in the budget. We've never been able to hire, or we've never had all 4 of them in place. We've pretty steadily had 2. Right now, we're looking at potentially taking one of them who's been a long-term auxiliary officer and making it actually a full-time auxiliary officer position and focusing him on traffic, on parking enforcement and trying to look at that. You know, it's one of those situations where there's a need for the regulation part of it, but there's also some income that comes in from your traffic or from your parking. In years past, both of these lots back here had parking meters and they were enforced. And, you know, there were people that parked there that worked in all these businesses around here that came out and fed the meters. Well, you know, that's something that pays for sort of your enforcement regulations. It is something that's on the scope.
Good.
Expenditures for 911 services, what is the projection for this being completed? Understand the switch over to Hamilton County, but is not sure on forecasting for continued ongoing expenses. We pay dispatch fees, and we will continue to pay dispatch fees. It's not like that's going to go away. There were some different pieces of equipment that we had loans and leases on that we were paying off. But the expenditures, we're looking at Hamilton County and saying, well, are they going to increase their fees to the municipalities that they provide support to? They passed some different taxes with the county and got this down to a very reasonable amount for us to participate in that. So, you know.
This is my lack of knowledge on this, and so just a question. So like with those narratives, you know, we kind of have the year it started and then the completion. Do we need all of these to be completed at some point, or is this just kind of like, hey, it's ongoing, we're monitoring it? Like, does the state need to sign off and say, okay, you guys have completed all these narratives, so that's not
No, the
needed?
The narratives are really to get some summary information on what's going on for, you know, sort of the layman who gets involved.
Okay.
If council members stayed on for 10 years, you wouldn't need narratives maybe, but council members change and there's constantly sort of a flow of some of those things. There were, when we originally got involved in this, there were absolutely items that we said, these need to change. And there were dates that, you know, this is when it's going to start and this is when it will stop. A lot of that had to do with funding and where we were pulling funds to pay for other things, and where we said that was necessary when we were absolutely in dire straits and having a hard time meeting payroll, but it's not necessary now, but we continue that practice. And some of those things need to be realigned, and those are items that were definitely had a due date and delivery and finish.
Okay. Thank you.
Assurances of the financial recovery plan. With the financial recovery plan, budgeting and fire, police, public works, streets, parks, etc., are static.
I might have used the wrong word. I don't know if static is what I meant with that. I was just kind of talking about in like the last couple or 3 years. It's just the same number that you're accounting in those capital projects.
I'm not sure what numbers, are you saying on the capital improvements planning worksheet?
No, just like capital projects. So if we're looking at, you know, statement of revenues, expenditures and all that, you know, like next year, you can tell like, okay, there's, if we look at fire department, capital projects, like, you know, we've got a 2025, 295, right? But then it drops down to 70 for the next 3 years. So is that just kind of because that capital improvement project's 5-year plan changes kind of consistently, or it's just that variation in the numbers from 2025 and then 26. So just a little bit more information on kind of,
Yeah.
again, I just might not know going forward and all of that. So that's,
Well,
there was a few departments that were like that, so.
yeah, and those are just projections for 26, 27, 28. When
Yeah.
we say 70,000, I mean, we know that the fire department has more capital. I mean, if you look at the capital projects worksheet, there's a considerable amount of money. So you have to go back to, that's the very back, really. The very back pages. And if you look at the numbers on those for the total fire department, when you look at capital projects, fire department EMS administration for 24, it's almost $1 million, $989,000. And then in 25, it's $839,491. So those aren't numbers that can be programmed into your other spreadsheet, because it skews what you have. So really, if you're looking at capital projects, if you're looking at capital, you should be looking at the capital projects planning or capital improvements planning worksheet. And that tells you, it gives you a little bit bigger picture of it.
For those years.
Yeah, well, and for years out, what potentially, what some of the debt service and some of the information, I mean, we put in there for 2025, there's SCBA, which is the face mask, the self-contained breathing apparatus, 50,000. But ultimately, if the fire department is not successful in getting a grant, that's going to be a considerable amount higher. We've got our fingers crossed, and they always do a pretty good job of putting a good grant application in. And Tom, I think you guys have been successful the last 3 times, 4 times.
The city hasn't bought air packs since 1996, so the last 2 times, it was double back dollar.
Well, let's clarify. The fire department's got all sorts of new air packs since then. The city has not had to pay for them because they've been successful in their grants.
Okay.
That's an important part of it. So we've got some matching funds in there, but if something happened where they needed it, we're gonna have to make some movement there. Next one is, fire department personnel. Fund balance is the police chief and the fire chief and the superintendent and the other department heads put together budgets and provide personnel service numbers for us, and we use them, and then the auditor's office looks at those numbers. The question you're talking about is, some of the reasoning behind maybe trending down on some of those. And, based on the chief's numbers, but better management, I would say, a younger workforce, less injuries. There are a lot of contributing factors. And I do put a lot towards the workforce that we have and the policies and procedures and the practices that not only the fire department have, but the police department have.
Okay. While we're kind of on personnel, I forgot to add that in there. Emily and I were both kind of wondering how the hiring's going in the Public Works Department. So that was on one of the narratives, just kind of to, buff up the workforce there for the streets and all that. So we were wondering how that's been going, because we didn't see really any changes. Again, we might have not been looking in the right spot of where it's represented in the budget, but we just didn't know how that's been going.
If that was a directive from city council to add people to the street department and add people to public works, it wasn't something that was put in that I looked at and said, we need to add a bunch of people. We've got a street department that does the work that's there. If our you can look at it 2 different ways. In years past, the city of Norwood had a public works department that went out and did concrete work, and they did a lot more stuff, and they were higher staff. But the decision was made years later that it wasn't cost effective for the city to try to run those operations. I'm sure, as you know, government doesn't do those things well. So there's not, I don't think there's no increase in here that I put in for,
So I think that the thing that I was looking at was for personal services expenditures in the kind of narrative. There's one for 2020 that says fully staffed public works positions to proactively repair streets. So that might be something that's just like an ongoing thing as people retire. I didn't know if there is a plan to add more. If there's not, then that answers my question.
no, I think the idea is to keep it fully staffed.
Keep it full of stuff.
Keep it fully staffed so that they are, and it's much like the police department and the fire department. You know, you can run an operation and say, well, we're going to run a few men short and we'll just work everybody on overtime.
Right.
You're still spending the money and you're probably getting less out of it. For our public works department, they are pretty efficient and they run a pretty lean operation. I think what was happening then was there were 2 or 3 open positions, and it's like somebody needs to go out and fill potholes. And it's like, well, we're going to have to move people from other departments to do those things. Well, now nobody's cutting the grass because they're on the street. So the goal was to get them fully staffed and make sure, and I think they're pretty stable right now.
Great.
It has a pretty good crew.
That answers my question, because Yeah.
Were we fully staffed or not?
if we're fully staffed or not, if we are, then great.
Yeah, it was probably
So-
it was probably added at a time that
Yeah.
they needed to increase the budget, and that was probably glaring, and they noted it.
Yeah,
So
because it seemed like, potholes are getting filled, but that makes sense. All right.
They'll be the first ones to say, give us 5 more guys and we'll get
I mean,
five,
yeah.
5 times more work, but,
reunion.
I know what you mean.
yeah. So I think the last comment you had on here for me, Candace, was that you spoke to both the chiefs about the budgets. That both the chiefs were very helpful. That surprises me. It doesn't surprise me. I do think we have chiefs that know the numbers and know what it takes to run their operations, and I think that's a real asset to us. And my comments were more and more and more always, the fire department would love to be able to handle every situation and, with their own tools and with their own equipment every time and that's the way that fire departments try to run. But they know there's limitations to what they can, I think back to one of the sheriffs in Hamilton County, they had hovercrafts and all sorts of extras, 2 helicopters, not one. They had all sorts of stuff, and I thought, why are they? And it's in the parade. They've got these 2 hovercrafts and stuff, and I thought, wow. But they could handle a lot of others. So there's always more that you could utilize and work with. Fire engines, ambulances, all of this stuff wears out. They recognize that. They've got plans laid out saying this is what we need to do and the path forward. I think that's one of the areas where when we first started this conversation and we said, what's our long-term goals? What's our path forward? That is something that I know Chief McCabe has talked about many a times, putting it in writing. This is our really, a plan that's comprehensive. So you bring in all the information that his group has brought in the fire department, the police department, and public works, and put it into a plan that way. We haven't been in a position to do that, but I'm willing to move forward in that direction. That's something we could do. This, with the ladder truck and where we're standing money-wise, I mean, we put funding in for a new ladder truck, which we couldn't have did 2 years ago, but we were still fretting over how we're going to replace the ladder truck. And we've got a good Band-Aid ladder truck, but we've got to have a ladder truck. So now not only have we looked at, okay, let's put money in for a ladder truck, then we're also looking at it saying, when we buy this ladder truck, how are we going to purchase it? Are we going to do a loan, work with them and or should we go to them and say, hey, we can give you this lump sum amount this year when we sign the contract, and next year we'll give you another lump sum and we'll pay for it at the end when because it takes 4 years, 5 years.
34 months right now from signing the contract.
34 months. So
Jesus.
a few years.
We don't need it.
But if we put a plan forward, I mean, we can move to a point where we're not seeing, that we've got debt on an ambulance and on a fire truck for multiple years after this. We're doing things like that. So that's the city's, in the years that I've been involved with the city, we've never been in a position like that, where we can make some decisions to say, we don't really need to take a loan. Let's structure this a little bit differently and make it work out long-term for us, so. Those were the questions
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you've put at me.
I think I covered it.
What I brought in is the FRP as it stands today. So you'll notice it's a yellow sheet on the front of it. I think the last one you guys got was a blue sheet.
Yes.
So you don't get them mixed up. I've been working with the Auditor of State's office to get more corrections in. Most of them have been minor. I actually have a couple more that she just sent at me, about 10, but they are minor. It's minor stuff like, the salary for the recreation director is not in fully. We need to tweak and fix those numbers. It is minimal amounts of money. And then there's some discussion between the Auditor of State's office and I on, some of the ways that we have did the FRP in the past, and they're saying maybe you should look at doing it differently now, and I disagree. So we have a couple where there's some different fundamental discussions. But there's not much that will change between this and this will probably be the exhibit that you see tomorrow at the special council meeting. John, you look like you got a question.
No, not at all. Taking it in, Mr. Snyder. Thank you for that.
Any other?
Well, those my questions were answered.
Okay. Mr. Bonzel, Chief, any other input?
Yep, no additional comments.
So submitting a committee report at the special meeting tomorrow. What's your guys' recommendation on passing it?
I mean, based
I think
on,
this right here,
yes,
right here in front of us.
So when I submit my report, I just want to be able to guide the rest of the council members.
I think for me, I feel satisfied with the answers we've gotten for the questions we had, and I think it's at least, unless anything weird comes up, I'm fine with saying we should accept it as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I trust the people involved did good work here without going over every bit of this.
Yeah.
I have faith in this document.
Yeah, and I know, Candace, you've talked to the auditor as well about it too, who just wasn't here today. So
Yes.
considering all that, it seems like
Yeah.
I'm sure we could nitpick all day long, but I don't want to.
Yeah. No, I think questions are answered. It looks good. Excited to move forward and keep chugging along.
Well, I've tried to get this stuff to you as early as I could with the way that the year closed out, with the numbers come in, with all the information that has to be compiled. And this isn't just me, of course. I mean, this is the auditor's office, it's the treasurer's office providing information. The payroll, Jeff Forster down in the auditor's office does a lot of work on getting this together. I was consulting with Jim Stiff, the former auditor, working with him on this stuff, trying to make sure we were all on the same page. So it's a lengthy process. I'd love to say we could have gotten this to you months and months earlier, but it doesn't work that way. It all comes down to sort of this. And it continues to be a lengthy process for me because it's getting it in front of getting it approved, getting it in front of city council for city council's approval. And then we have the upcoming financial supervision commission meeting and getting it in front of them and going through that whole process too. So it takes a lot of time and effort from a lot of different people to get it where it is.
Do you feel like you feel like it's progressing where things can move a little bit quicker or giving us the information a little bit faster? Or does it just vary every submission?
I'd love to
There's no-
say yes, and I feel like I tried to force it the last 2 years to try to move it forward quicker. But there's numbers that have to come in, there's estimations, there's so many different things that have to come together. It's almost like it doesn't work any faster than this. In years past, I was involved with the city, and this is 20 years ago, when we put together a budget, and the finance committee, and I sat down and we went through and put together the whole budget. James, you were involved in processes like that probably in years past, but it's with the Financial Recovery Commission, it's a totally different animal. Now, realize, when we were putting together budgets in years past, this is next year's budget. You know, it was November and we were putting together, and we weren't looking at, we've had a hard time getting any picture of what was going on 2 or 3 years, let alone 5 years out. So this tool that we're using and the way that it's being done now is the path to really keep moving in a positive direction. This is the first time we talked about streets, and I have talked about, you know, we're always trying to leverage our money. We've got to leverage our money to get as much of the street stuff as we can. We're now in a position where we can use some of the money that we have to do some of the residential streets that we will never get any kind of funding on. I mean, you're just not going to get it. It's going to have to come out of our operating funds and out of our state, you know, not our state, but some of the, so there's different, this is the first time we've been in a position to do that. We're going to be able to, when they do some of these major projects, we're going to be able to do some of the side street stuff, some of the connectors, and make it so that, you know, when you're driving around Norwood, your teeth aren't getting rattled. So,
Yeah, that is good to know, because as you know, the first question on everyone's mind is always about streets and why we're not paving them. So I'm looking forward especially to that little section of forest by Smith getting repaved soon. So I know that's something you'd already talked about with them doing Smith Road down there. So
yeah, the ice cream shop.
yes,
I mean, it's terrible. There are a lot of terrible streets that really need, and that are heavily traveled streets, and you think, wow, man. Mm-hmm. It'll be so good when we get the 561, the Smith Avenue, and that whole intersection of Lafayette and Park and all that. That's just
All right. Well, that's all I had on the agenda for tonight. And I'll get everything out, and we'll go over it tomorrow at our meeting.
Perfect.
yep.
Thank you.
All right.
We'll see you all
Thank you.
tomorrow.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.